comes down to control. It comes down to privacy. And most importantly, it comes down to trust. Yes, they know they cannot trust Harry and Meghan. Well, it looks like we have an answer from the palace.
The palace has already delivered its message, just not in the loud official way people usually expect. No formal statement, no press conference, no direct reply spelled out for headlines. Instead, it came through silence and through those carefully measured reactions from insiders who know exactly how to speak without really speaking. And if you know how to read between the lines, the meaning is crystal clear. The door is not opening. Harry's push for a summer visit to Sandringham, framed as a simple family moment, a son wanting to reconnect with his father, bringing the children along if everything felt right, has now met its answer. And that answer isn't dramatic, it isn't explosive, but it is firm. It's a no. Not necessarily forever, but definitely not right now. And that response reveals something deeper about why things are still locked the way they are, because this isn't just about timing or logistics. It comes down to 3 key issues, and one of them stands above everything else: trust. That's the core of it. And right now, that trust is completely missing. Not in a vague or emotional way, not just hurt feelings or past tension, but in a very real, practical sense. There's no confidence that anything shared behind closed doors will actually stay behind closed doors. And that matters more than anything else, because from the palace's perspective, this isn't just a feeling, it's a conclusion built over time, based on what they see as a clear pattern. Look at what's already happened. Private family conversations have ended up in global productions seen by millions. Personal moments, direct exchanges, even sensitive discussions between close family members have all made their way into the public space. Details that were once kept strictly within the family circle have been shared on massive platforms.
Harry wants to go back to England for the summer. He has made things look like you can see the children if you give me the security, kind of blackmailing the king.
Discussed worldwide and picked apart by audiences everywhere. And that includes deeply personal topics, private calls, and moments that were never expected to leave that inner circle. So from this point of view, the hesitation around Sandringham isn't about holding grudges or refusing to move forward. It's about control, privacy, and the concern that history could repeat itself if those doors open again. This situation isn't really about forgiveness at all. It's not something that can be fixed with a simple apology or a decision to move on. What's at play here is something much deeper, a structural reality that the palace sees as impossible to ignore, because from their perspective, private family moments shared in the past didn't stay private. They turned into public content, shaped into stories, and used in a way that supported a wider narrative about the royal family falling short. And that's where the real clash begins. The monarchy operates on a completely different system. For decades, it has followed one core idea: stay quiet, stay controlled, and never overexpose what happens behind closed doors. That distance, that restraint, is exactly what has kept the institution standing strong through constant public attention. It's not accidental. It's designed that way. The less the public knows about internal dynamics, the more stable the image remains. That sense of mystery isn't a weakness. It's actually protection. But what we've seen over the past few years flips that entire approach upside down. Private moments becoming public stories, personal experiences turned into global talking points, family situations being shared in formats designed for massive audiences. And once that line is crossed, it's very hard to go back. From the palace's point of view, this isn't random or one-off behavior. It's a pattern that has repeated itself across multiple situations.
Harry is not doing things the right way, and I think part of that is because he's very desperate. It does sound like it's a reconciliation. He wants to come back. I'm sorry.
Across different platforms and over a long period of time. So now they're asking one simple question. What happens next? If a visit to Sandringham actually happens, what follows? After that, and this isn't some extreme or dramatic assumption, it's a practical concern based on what they've already seen play out before. Because looking at past situations, it's not hard to imagine how things could unfold. Details from the visit could eventually appear in interviews or discussions or other public formats. Moments that felt private at the time could later be described, interpreted, and shared in a way that reaches a global audience. Things like conversations, reactions, how everyone interacted, even small personal details. All of it could become part of a larger story later on. And that's exactly what the palace wants to avoid. This isn't guesswork. It's a pattern they believe they've already seen enough times. So from their side, the decision is about not creating new material that could later be turned into something public. And this is where another key layer comes in, because internally, the concern isn't viewed the same way when it comes to Harry alone versus Harry and Meghan together. That difference matters more than people realize. There are still signs that the connection between father and son hasn't completely disappeared. It may be strained, it may be complicated, but it's not entirely gone. But when both Harry and Meghan are involved, the situation changes. The concern becomes much more focused on how information is handled, how stories are shaped, and how narratives are built over time. It's not just about what happens in the moment, it's about what that moment could become later. From the palace's point of view, there's a belief that certain individuals have shown a strong ability to take private experiences and turn them into structured public narratives.
Harry wants to return to the United Kingdom. He is putting things out there very publicly. He is saying that he will come back with the children, and if he can get his security, like you can see the kids, Papa.
And that level of control over storytelling is exactly what raises the risk. Because once access is given, there's no way to fully control how those experiences might be presented later. That's why the hesitation isn't temporary or emotional, it's strategic. They're not willing to provide new private moments that could potentially be reshaped into something much bigger afterward. And this is the part that often gets lost in public discussion. The headlines focus on family, on reconnection, on the idea of a son visiting his father with his children. But behind the scenes, the real question is much more calculated. What happens after the visit is over? Because based on everything that's already happened, that's the part that carries the most weight. And right now, that answer is exactly what's keeping the door closed. The message being signaled right now is simple, but it hits hard. If Harry wants that door even slightly open, there are conditions attached. Come see your father. Bring the children if that matters. Allow that family moment to happen. But understand this clearly, certain dynamics change everything. Because from the palace's perspective, the situation shifts depending on who is present. Harry on his own is viewed one way, but Harry alongside Meghan is seen very differently. And that difference is exactly what keeps the door shut right now. So the real question becomes, is Harry even in a position to make that kind of choice? That's where things get complicated. There have been small signals, moments that people watching closely have picked up on. Subtle distancing here and there, slight shifts in tone, hints that he still sees himself as a son first, not just part of a larger public narrative, but those signs are small, and they sit inside something much bigger that has already been built over time. Because separating from that shared path isn't simple, not personally, not publicly.
Meghan Markle doesn't just use the media. We know this. She understands it, she controls it, and she builds this narrative with it. It's what Meghan's motto is. That is what she needs to try to create the brand that she so desperately needs to be successful. We all know that her As Ever brand is failing. It has essentially failed.
And definitely not financially. Right now, everything remains connected, and there's no clear sign that a major shift is about to happen anytime soon. So the current situation stays exactly where it is. No invitation, no open door, just a position that's been made. Clear without needing to be officially announced. But there is one moment on the horizon that could change everything. The Invictus Games in Birmingham in 2027. That's the one event that cuts through all of this. Harry will be in the UK for it, and that much is certain. It's a commitment that stands above the tension, something that carries real meaning and can't simply be brushed aside. And when that moment comes, the pressure will build instantly. People will start asking, can a private family connection exist alongside a major public event? Can something be arranged behind the scenes? Can the current barriers shift even slightly? Between now and then, a lot can change. Legal outcomes, security decisions, public perception, and the direction of their public projects. All of these factors could influence what happens next. Even the king's situation adds another layer of uncertainty that can't be ignored. But through all of this, one thing remains at the center of everything: trust. And that's not something that fixes itself with time. It requires visible change, consistent behavior, and a clear shift in how things are handled over a long period. Right now, that shift hasn't happened. There's no strong sign of a move toward more privacy, less sharing, or a different approach overall. And that's why the position hasn't changed. Because from the palace's view, the current model still depends on sharing personal experiences.
Every time Meghan steps into the spotlight, every single time, we remember Princess Diana driving by when she went to Paris, where Princess Diana passed away, as an example.
And turning them into public narratives. And as long as that continues, the risk stays exactly the same. So the answer remains what it is. Not dramatic, not emotional, just firm. No, the conditions for a different outcome are understood, but they aren't being met right now. And that leaves everything in a kind of standstill. A closed door, a divided family, and a situation built over years that can't be undone with one visit or one conversation. At some point, a choice will have to be made. The palace has already made theirs. Now the question is, what will Harry decide to do next? To really understand why things are this way, you have to look deeper at how the institution itself works, because this isn't just about personal feelings, it's about survival. The monarchy has lasted for centuries in an environment where many similar systems disappeared completely. Across Europe, entire royal structures collapsed, but this one adapted and kept going. And it did that by following a very specific formula. Stay visible but never fully exposed. Be present but never fully explained. That balance is everything. The moment that balance breaks, the entire structure starts to face pressure from a completely different angle. And that's exactly why the rule has always been clear. Don't over-explain, don't overreact, and don't let internal matters become public narratives. Because once that line is crossed, it's almost impossible to reverse. And over the past few years, that line has been crossed multiple times. Private experiences shared publicly, personal moments turned into global discussions, and internal dynamics presented in a way that invites constant judgment. From the palace's point of view, that changes the entire playing field, because now it's no longer about quiet tradition.
Example, everything that she does publicly, the monarchy follows, and her title still carries weight globally, commercially, and culturally.
It becomes something else entirely. A situation where private life can quickly turn into public content. And that's exactly what they're trying to prevent moving forward. Not because they want to avoid responsibility, but because the way things are being presented now doesn't fit the system they rely on to function. It's not just exposure. It's a transformation of how the story is told. And that's why the resistance remains so strong. Because allowing that cycle to continue would mean giving up control over how the institution protects itself. And that's a risk they're clearly not willing to take right now. At the heart of this situation is something the palace sees as a serious problem. It's the idea that private family moments can be turned into public material, shaped into stories, and used to build both reputation and business value. And from their perspective, that kind of shift doesn't just create tension, it threatens the very foundation the monarchy depends on. Because what keeps the institution stable isn't just tradition, it's the belief that there is still a private space, something real that exists beyond cameras, headlines, and content strategies. The moment people start thinking that every interaction could later show up in a documentary or interview, that sense of mystery disappears completely. And once that mystery is gone, it's incredibly difficult to bring it back. What's left starts to look less like a long-standing institution and more like a public-facing family whose personal dynamics are consumed for entertainment. Interesting for a moment, maybe even attention-grabbing, but not something that holds long-term weight. That's why the situation goes beyond just Harry and Meghan as individuals. From the palace's point of view, it's about the principle behind everything that has happened. The idea that private family life could be used as material for public storytelling, and the decision not to create new opportunities for that to continue. There's also a generational factor that plays a big role here, because William's approach to all of this is especially firm, and that's not random. He's preparing for the future in a very deliberate way, and the system he wants to maintain is clear, a balance between being visible to the public while still protecting private life, being present but not fully exposed. And that balance is something he has been careful to maintain. You can see it in how public moments are handled. Selective appearances, controlled visibility, and only certain glimpses into family life that feel natural because they're not constant. It's intentional. You see moments, but not everything. And that's the key difference, because the alternative would be constant exposure, where every detail becomes part of an ongoing narrative. That's not the model being protected here. The future direction is one where privacy is actively defended, not gradually given away. and anything that could disrupt that structure is treated as a serious risk. So when it comes to the Sandringham question, the answer stays the same. No, not out of emotion, but because of a long-term vision of how the institution needs to function. But that naturally leads to another question. What would it take for that answer to change? The conditions are actually very clear. First, there would need to be a real shift in behavior over time. Not just words or promises, but consistent actions showing that private moments remain private. Because one statement alone wouldn't be enough to undo what has already happened. Second, trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, through time, through consistency, and through the absence of anything being shared publicly afterward. Trust in this situation isn't restored overnight. It has to be proven step by step. And third, there would need to be some visible separation between family connection and public storytelling. Not a complete break, but enough to show that personal moments wouldn't automatically become part of a larger narrative later. And that's where things get especially difficult. Because right now, everything is closely connected. Public image, storytelling, and personal experiences all feed into each other. So meeting those conditions would require a major shift that hasn't happened yet. And until that shift happens, nothing changes. In fact, the pressure to create new material may actually be increasing, which makes the situation even more complicated because the need for content can clash directly with the need for privacy, and that creates a cycle that's hard to break. More pressure leads to more sharing. More sharing leads to less trust, and less trust leads to fewer opportunities for private access. That loop keeps repeating. The Sandringham request, in many ways, looks like an attempt to change that dynamic, to reopen the connection, to rebuild access, and to reset how things move forward. But from the palace's side, that same move also carries risk, because it could restart the very pattern they're trying to avoid. So the response remains consistent. No, not necessarily forever, but for now, because the current conditions don't support a different outcome. And even though there are real human elements in this story, family ties, missed connections, and the desire to reconnect, those factors are being weighed against long-term stability. And right now, the balance leans in one direction. The risk is seen as greater than the benefit. So the door stays closed, and that leaves Harry facing a decision that goes far beyond logistics or invitations. It's not about timing or location, it's about what changes he's willing to make, how long he's willing to sustain those changes, and whether the life he's built can adjust to that reality. Because the palace has already made its position clear, without saying it directly. Now everything depends on what happens next, and that space between what's being said publicly and what's actually done over time. That's the space that will shape how this story continues. Whatever comes next will come from that exact point. This moment connects everything we're seeing now to the bigger story that's been unfolding for years. Because this situation didn't happen overnight. It moved through clear stages, each one pushing things further apart. It started with that first phase back in early 2020. The announcement, the shock, the negotiations, and that critical Sandringham meeting where everything was being defined. At that point, there was still some hope in the air that a workable path could be found, something that kept a connection alive while allowing change. Then came the second phase, and that's where everything shifted hard. This was the period where private experiences started becoming public narratives, major interviews, large-scale projects, and detailed accounts that reached audiences around the world. That's when the trust gap really formed. And it didn't come from one moment. It came from a series of decisions that stacked up quickly. And this isn't distant history either. These developments are recent enough that their impact is still fresh, still shaping how everything is being viewed today. Now we're in what can only be described as the consequences phase. This is where the long-term effects of those earlier decisions are playing out in real time. Public projects have slowed down, major deals have shifted, and the connection to the family hasn't been rebuilt. Everything right now reflects the outcome of what came before. And that brings us to what looks like an attempt to move into a fourth phase, a phase where some level of reconnection could happen, where family ties could be partially restored, and where things could reset in a more stable way. But here's the key point. The palace hasn't agreed to that transition, not because the idea of reconnecting is impossible, but because the conditions needed to make it safe haven't been met yet. Trust, privacy, and consistent behavior. Those are still the missing pieces. So now both sides are stuck in a waiting game. One side waiting for an invitation, the other waiting for proof that things would be different this time. And while that standoff continues, the real impact is being felt by everyone involved. A father who wants to see his grandchildren, children growing up without that connection, and a son dealing with the distance from the family he once had. All of it sits in this unresolved space. The truth is, situations like this rarely get fixed quickly. History shows that even within royal families, these kinds of breaks can take years to shift, and sometimes they never fully do. There are examples of relationships that stayed complicated for decades, evolving slowly, never returning to what they once were. And that's why where this story ends is still completely uncertain. There are real forces pushing toward reconnection. Time, family bonds, personal reflection, and changing circumstances. But at the same time, there are just as many forces pushing in the opposite direction. The lack of trust, the established patterns, and the pressures that make change difficult. Both sides of that equation are very real. And right now, the path forward isn't clear. What is clear is this: the current approach isn't working. The Sandringham proposal, as it stands, isn't the solution. And that message has already been made clear without needing to say it directly. So the next move matters more than anything. And that move doesn't come from statements, headlines, or public positioning. It comes from consistent actions over time. Because that's the only thing that can actually change how this situation is viewed. Whether that happens, that's the big question. And even deeper than that, whether everything around Harry allows that kind of change to happen, because timing matters too. Opportunities don't stay open forever, and the longer things remain the same, the harder it becomes to shift them later. So right now, everything sits in that narrow space between closed and not completely shut. The door isn't open, but it's not locked forever either. And what happens next depends entirely on what choices are made from here. Is this something that eventually finds a way back to connection, or does it become a permanent divide? That answer hasn't been written yet, but it's coming. So now it's your turn to weigh in. What do you think really happens next in this situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. If you made it this far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more breakdowns like this, and share this with anyone following the story. And I'll see you on the next one.